Reflections on the Past, A Bridge to the Future, 2022, P.E.O, Olympia, Washington. Dear Founders, it's with deep humility and appreciation that I write to you to thank you for the gift you have given to the future of P.E.O. The foundation that you laid when first you suggested starting a society of our own has withstood the test of time. You would be so pleased to know that P.E.O. today has a membership of more than 250,000 women, as well as chapters in all 50 states and 5 Canadian provinces. You would be particularly pleased to know that P.E.O. developed into a philanthropic organization supporting 6 major educational projects. We are just coming out of a public health crisis which saw the world isolate, and during which time face masks became a fashion statement. COVID-19, they called it, coronavirus disease. Generally speaking, the fear of catching this virulent disease kept us isolated in our own homes, unable to meet in person, and it became a challenge to strategize how we could maintain continuity of our dear sisterhood and practice our philanthropic work. We had to figure out how we could continue to meet, although not in person. Through the wonder of scientific, technically advanced means, we were able to stay in touch and in our own homes and still hold meetings through the magic of something called Zoom. Zooming became vernacular for meeting. It's how people gathered and conducted business virtually. It's during that time of isolation, being apart and yet being together through Zoom, that we became more aware of the heritage you left us as a gift to the future. Reciting the objects and aims, singing the ode, and conducting our business made me all the more aware of how these remained so relevant and inspired me to reflect in wonderment that over 150 years ago, you had the prescience to build a strong foundation. I have so many questions, and the first makes me ask, what was the impetus to form such a group, considering in 1869 there were fewer than 100 collegiate students at IWU? Legend has it that some, but not all, of a close-knit group of 7 friends had been invited to join the IC chapter. 50 years later, P.E.O. founder Frank Rhodes recounted the events of 1869 and the rivalry of the IC that precipitated the formation of the first P.E.O. chapter. On January 21st, 1869, she and Hattie Briggs were sitting on the steps of a wooden stile at the southeast entrance to the campus. Hattie suggested they create a society of our own. Frank concurred, and they went to find Mary Allen. Then they asked Ella Stewart, Suela Pearson, and the 2 Allies, Alice Bird and Alice Virginia Coffin. The 7 young women ranged in age from 16 to 20. This from the history of the P.E.O. Sisterhood, consisting of a compilation of the writings of various past and present officers of the Sisterhood, published in 1903, a writing from Mrs. Alice Babb. The surface reason for our existence is that 7 of us college girls had been together for 3 or 4 years in study and in society, and we found a strong tie, unusually so. As our tastes ran in the same direction, our natures were congenial, and when the problem of separation confronted us, we felt that something must mark the era of our friendship, some token that might strengthen the bond and reveal to others what a lovely friendship ours had been. It is impossible for any of us today to state definitely who suggested the forming of a secret society, but the proposition was made, and hastily made, and we identical 7 be the nucleus of a sisterhood. Of course, at the time, we little dreamed of the great outcome, and yet we were earnest, and even then desired something broad and substantial. We did not for 1 minute wish for it to be a mere college fraternity. We wished a society of more lasting name and reputation. The suggestion was made on the morning of January 21st, 1869. So anxious were we for immediate recognition that Alice Coffin told me that I must prepare a constitution to be submitted to the other 6 on the afternoon of the same day, which I gladly did, and which was at once adopted. It was suggested on the afternoon of that day in January in the old music room of the chapel of Iowa Wesleyan University that the oath be read to me, and then I read it to the other 6. Alice Stewart, in earnest, sweet tones, read that oath for the first time in genuine work, and I was the first P.E.O. to assent to it. I forgot to whom I read it first, but when each one had answered in turn, we immediately elected our officers and went to work in real earnest. Mrs. Alice Babb, 1920. Mary Alice Bird, Babb, May 8, 1850 to November 21st, 1926, was the founder who stayed closest to the sisterhood. Hers was a lifelong involvement in P.E.O. Her contributions through speeches at conventions and articles for the P.E.O. record have provided a humanizing picture of the 6 girls and have given a sometimes candid insight into their lives. Alice Bird Babb retained her membership in Chapter Original A until her death. Alice was born in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, the daughter of Dr. Wellington and Sarah Thornton Bird. Dr. Bird was a pioneer from Pennsylvania and the first physician in Henry County, Iowa. Mrs. Bird also came from the East, but by way of Indiana. She was a courageous, educated, cheerful, busy little person interested in everything and everyone around her. The Bird family figured notably in the early Mount Pleasant and Iowa Wesleyan. Harriet Jane Briggs Bouquet, October 10th, 1849 to June 22nd, 1877. Hattie, as she came to be called, had 3 brothers and 1 sister. She attended the preparatory department of Iowa Wesleyan before entering a college in September 1865. Members of the Briggs family were active in the events of the town, and Mr. Briggs was a trustee of Iowa Wesleyan for 15 years. Alice Bird said of her, Hattie was the quiet one, mild temperament and sweet manners, light brown hair combed back from a high forehead, worn plain with occasional loose locks which would creep out. Her eyes were luminous, and she was studious, never seeming to strive for the front rank, yet always full of charm and grace. She always was ready to heal where others might wound. Miss Alice Virginia Coffin, March 29, 1848, July 28, 1888. Alice Virginia Coffin was born in Louisville, Kentucky. She was devoted to her mother, Martha, who died when Alice was only 9. When her father, Matthew, left for the Civil War, Alice and her 3 siblings were enrolled at Iowa Wesleyan in Mount Pleasant. Allie, as her friends called her, is credited with suggesting the motto for the sisterhood, an instruction that her father would say to his children when he traveled. She also suggested the star as its symbol. Alice was quite a cut-up and enjoyed dancing so much that she left the Methodist Church, which forbade it, and joined the Episcopalian Church, which did not. Alice received a B.S. in 1869 and an honorary M.S. in 1872. She became a beloved school teacher in Des Moines, Chariton, and Newton, Iowa, until her death from Bright's disease on July 29, 1888. At her request, she was buried as the sun set next to her parents. Ellis Stewart, May 8, 1848 to December 12, 1894. According to Alice Bird, Ella was cheerful, very talkative, always suggesting ways and means, and was not afraid to put her hand to whatever needed doing. She was able to make the best of everything and had learned the lessons of economy and thrift to perfection. She entered Iowa Wesleyan in September 1865. After taking 8 courses over a period of 2 years, she dropped out of college but continued to take part in social activities. Her dropping out was not due to lack of scholarship. Rather, it was because the need for help at home was so great that she could not carry a full schedule or attend classes during certain hours. She was the only founder who did not graduate, but it seems likely that she audited many classes as a special student, though not for credit. Suella Pearson Penfield, August 24th, 1851 to September 20th, 1930. Mary Suella Pearson came by her unusual name from her father, who read a Spanish novel in which the heroine was named Suella. He liked the name so much that he named his only daughter this when she was born in Cleveland, Ohio, in August of 1851. Dr. Clement Pearson was a successful early practitioner of the Homeopathic School of Medicine. The founder of the Hahnemann Medical Society, he was its president for many years. Suella's mother, Eleanor Rose McKinley Pearson, was a beautiful, cultured woman from a distinguished family. William McKinley, President of the United States, was a relative. Circa 1860, when Suella and Will, her brother, were still in grade school, Dr. Pearson brought his family to Mount Pleasant, Iowa. Here, their beautiful new home, enhanced by Mrs. Pearson's flower garden, soon became a showplace and social center. They enjoyed society and brought with them the spirit of hospitality. The Pearsons lived in a more pretentious home than the other in Suella's group. Suella attended the academy at Iowa Wesleyan, then entered the university as a freshman in the fall of 1866, just after her 15th birthday. She participated in many school activities, became an excellent musician, and was outstanding in elocution. She was charming, gay, and gracious, beautiful and intelligent. She seemed meant to be adored, and adored she was. In 1876, Suella married Frank Harold Penfield of Cleveland, Ohio, a man of English ancestry and of Mayflower descent. He was associated with the Standard Oil Company and later was a real estate developer in Cleveland. The Penfields lived near the Rockefeller home in Cleveland, and they were prominent in Cleveland society. They had 2 children, Marie Rose Penfield and Frank Pearson Penfield. In spite of her fairy tale beginnings, all did not go well for Suella. The following item appeared in the P.E.O. record in August 1901, 25 years after Suella's marriage. Trouble of more than one kind has overtaken one of our honored original 7, according to a press dispatch in the current news items of July, saying, quote, Mrs. Suella Pearson Penfield has gone bankrupt in the New York courts. She secured a divorce from her husband in Cleveland, Ohio, receiving $50,000 as alimony about 5 years ago. Certainly PEOs will sympathize with a woman now so unfortunate, whose beauty and goodness are among the treasured traditions of early PEO, unquote. Frank Rhodes Elliott, February 10th to 1852, until August 9th, 1924. Frank Rhodes Elliott was the youngest and perhaps the most brilliant of the 7 founders. She was born on February 10th, 1852 at Marshall, Iowa, a little town near Mount Pleasant. Her father, Addison Rhodes, was a businessman and later a public official in Mount Pleasant. Her mother, Nancy McClure Rhodes, firmly supported the idea of PEO and lent a helping hand whenever she could. It was she who designed and helped the girls make the aprons for the march into chapel that introduced PEO to the world. Frank married Simon Elliott, a veteran of the Civil War. They moved to Lincoln, Nebraska, where Simon operated a China or Queensware store, as it was called in those days. You know, a China shop. The Elliots had 2 children. Charles Addison became a distinguished medical diagnostician. Stella May was educated at the University of Nebraska, where she was assistant in the Department of Physical Education. When the financial panic of 1893 depleted the Elliots' resources, Frank took a position as art supervisor for public schools to help finance their son's medical education. She was highly successful at Salt Lake City, Utah, and Aurora, Illinois, where she created a model classroom that attracted much attention. At that time, schoolrooms were generally dingy, dirty, and uninspiring. Frank used tinted walls and hardwood floors, and her room was properly lighted and well ventilated. In 1919, Frank presented a peace resolution that was adopted by the California State Convention. In one of her speeches to the Sisterhood, she said, quote, "I plead with you to limit the worship of old traditions, flattering as the worship may be to a few of us that are still with you, and forge ahead to newer, better things, for only in doing so will our efforts live to bless our memories and immortalize our order." How thoughtful it was to urge new chapters to forge ahead to newer and better ways of doing things, honoring the past but not being stuck in it. Again, the foundation you laid was done so in such a manner that, in Frank's own words, in her resolution, she encouraged future thinking, for only in doing so will our efforts live to bless our memories and immortalize our order. Frank had it just right. Encouraging future thinking is what helped the organization continue to evolve, building on the prescribed foundation. Mary Allen Stafford, December 30th, 1848, until July 10th, 1927. Mary was the last surviving member of the original 7 founders. Alice Bird Babbs said of her, "Mary was active, yet methodical, and always had a most pleasing, acceptable presence. She was more of a society girl than some of the others, and always the center of well-earned admiration. Mary and Alice Bird were friends and classmates in high school, and were said to have a sort of Siamese twin attachment. They were in the same classes, the same social events, and both were leaders." Dear founding sisters, me again, future PEO sister. I mentioned in the opening the development of 6 major educational projects. I'd like to enumerate these for you. PEO Educational Loan Fund, known as ELF, in 1907, was a revolving loan fund for qualified women students to help them secure a higher education. Cody College in 1927, a most generous bequeath from and later became the only non-sectarian college owned and supported by women, a liberal arts and science college in Nevada, Missouri. PEO International Peace Scholarship, IPS, 1949, provides scholarships for international women to pursue graduate studies in the U.S. or Canada. PEO Program for Continuing Education, PCE, 1973, provides needs-based grants for women in the U.S. or Canada whose education has been interrupted and who find it necessary to return to school to support themselves and or their families. PEO Scholar Awards, PSA 1999 provides substantial merit-based awards for women of the U.S. or Canada who are pursuing a doctoral level degree at an accredited college or university. P.E.O. Star Scholarship 2009 provides scholarships for exceptional high school senior women to attend an accredited post-secondary educational institution in the U.S. or Canada the next academic year. Additionally, Washington State supports the following projects: Emergency Assistant Fund, the Edith Markham Wallace Cotty College Scholarship Fund, which assists Washington students attending Cotty College. And our own Chapter Y supports several projects, but before I list those, I'd like to share a little history of Chapter Y. In the decade before Washington's statehood, Olympia quadrupled in population to nearly 8,000 inhabitants. Olympia fought very hard to remain the capital of the new state. 23 years later, Olympia's first PEO chapter came into being, Chapter Y. Information about the early years is limited, as many of the chapter's records are missing. What is known is the organization took place May 28, 1912, at the home of Emma P. Chadwick, the wife of a Supreme Court judge, and, according to some memories, a most interesting person. Grand Chapter organizer Ida Hare Coiner came from Tacoma to conduct the ceremonies, all the way from Tacoma. They were a small group in a town whose population fluctuated with the legislative sessions. They frequently found it difficult to make up a quorum, but they extended their interest to the community and provided books for the growing city library, worked toward organizing the Girl Scouts, and assisted in the work of the Lacey Farm Home. For 50 years, they knitted and crocheted countless lap robes for residents in the rest homes of Olympia and took gifts regularly to the hospital. 4 years after their organization, Emma Chadwick was elected as organizer on the Grand Chapter Board. During that year, she had the honor of organizing Chapter C, Vancouver, BC. From her 1917 convention report, we have a picture of Northwest travel at that time, and I quote, "To some, the work of the organizer may be tiresome and vexatious because of the irregular train connections and the annoyances incident to travel, but I suffered no inconvenience because of these things. I am a pioneer of this coast, and in my travels I found continual sources of wonder at the present development of our means of transportation as compared with the conveniences of even 18 years ago, when I had the honor of performing a somewhat similar service for another society." She had been worthy Grand Matron of the Order of Eastern Star. She served as first vice president of Grand Chapter in 1918. Her descendants have been Chapter Y members down to the 4th generation. Chapter Y's major interest was education. An early historian reported in May 1927, the Francis Walthew Memorial Scholarship Fund of $50 was permanently established in the school. This to be given to a worthy senior girl selected by a committee. This memorial is for our dear member who was so vital an influence in building the present high school and serving as a member of their board. She was, in fact, the first woman to be elected to the Olympia High School board. Kay Stafford, mother of Joan Halverstadt, and described as a most gracious lady, wife of Supreme Court Justice, made provision in her will for an endowment sum of $2,500, the income providing endowment awards for worthy aspirants from the Capital High School. This, added to the original Memorial Scholarship Fund, made it possible for the chapter to award scholarships to a student from each of the city's 2 high schools. Each June, the recipients joined the chapter members at lunch sharing their plans for college and their future. In 1924, Florence Rose was elected to the state chapter board as second vice president, becoming state chapter president in 1928. It was during her presidency that the Washington State chapter of P.E.O. Welfare Fund was first proposed, solely for the purpose of giving financial aid to any member of the sisterhood belonging to a local chapter in the state of Washington who is found to be in need and who is unable physically or mentally to earn a living for herself and who is without other means of support. Chapter Y grew. By 1933, when living rooms were becoming overcrowded, Charlotte Bench, Sue Brown, Emily Starr, and Lucy Williams demitted to form Olympia's second chapter, CF. Officers of the mother chapter assisted in the initiation. Two of the chapters, thereafter enjoyed birthdays, founders' days, BIL picnics, and parties together. The historian of that time noted its influence. Since Chapter CF has been organized in our city, it has strengthened Chapter Y both materially and spiritually. As our sisterhood has grown in a larger concept of P.E.O. in sharing its true meaning with another chapter. At the time of the state centennial, 8 chapters flourished in Olympia. Chapter Y is proud of its many members, honored for their work in the community. Adela Murfin, Winnie Schmidt, and Carol LaBelle are holders of the prestigious Bishop's Cross, awarded by the Episcopal Diocese for their faithful work in the church. Jean Richards, director of Washington State Capitol Museum. Joan Halverstadt, daughter of Kay Stafford, founded and enlarged a preschool program of note with centers in several cities. The chapter attained its goal as a Cotty Golden Anniversary in 1 year. Donna Mickelson, in her president's letter, described her fellow members. The outstanding attributes of Chapter Y is the love always present and shared between members. We are truly sisters. And aren't we the lucky ones to share in this legacy that we have inherited? In addition to the 2 previously mentioned scholarships, thanks to Sisters Frances and Kay, the following Chapter Y projects were funded. In 2007, the Dordina Rogel Chapter Y Scholar Fund Family Bequest. In 2012, Chapter Y annual income distribution to the P.E.O. Foundation's undesignated funds. In 2014, Chapter Y, Arlene Pattison Fund Family Bequest. In 2015, Chapter Y, Marge Halgren Fund Family Bequest. In 2015, Chapter Y, I believe I just said that, Marge Halgren Fund Family Bequest. And in 2020, Chapter Y, Barb A.G. Boost Grant, which is a needs-based financial support awarded to women furthering their education who does not qualify for any of the P.E.O. projects. Note, the Barb A.G. Boost Grant was established during COVID. Enough said. The 7 founders of P.E.O. were fortunate in their heritage. Theirs was a pioneer and religious background with highly significant emphasis on education. All of the 7 founders' families were deeply religious people, not just pious, but people who made practical application of religion in everyday life. They were the kind of people who settled Mount Pleasant, Iowa, and made it a cultural center that became fertile soil for the rapidly changing social structure of the mid-19th century, encompassing, as it did, the feminist movement, which developed hand in hand with education for women. Small wonder that our founders responded as they did to their heritage and environment. Small wonder that they developed the characteristics necessary to bring about greater change. They were charmed by the idea of P.E.O. and by the magic of working together for the advancement of women. There were new concepts in a century just awakening to the tremendous possibilities involved in educating females. As a haunting bit of melody sometimes runs through a musical composition, so do the values established by our founders continue to affect the dynamics of our sisterhood. Each of the founders brought some rare gift to P.E.O. Their ability, gifts, or attributes have been mentioned in many ways by many writers. They might be summarized as follows. From Mary Allen, P.E.O. gets its poise. From Alice Bird, its literary bent. From Hattie Briggs, its homemaking tendencies. From Alice Coffin, its interest in education. From Suella Pearson, gaiety and charming sociability. From Frank Rhodes, its vision and progressiveness. And from Ellis Stewart, its desire for social service. And so, dear founders, and our own Chapter Y ancestors, we who are sisters in heart and spirit give thanks for the star and its message. From We Who Are Sisters, I quote, "It is now incumbent on each member to continue the legacy bequeathed to us by our founders and the builders who followed. We who are sisters look forward to an enduring bond with our noteworthy past and anticipation of an exciting future."